In this tutorial, we're going to cover edit poly objects. In Max, we can use three different types of objects. We can use edit polys, edit meshes, or NURBs, and in this case, we're going to use edit polys. So if we just create a basic object, I'm going to go to my Create tab, select Geometry, Standard Primitives, and I'll just start with a plane here. Make sure you have shaded and edged faces selected so you can see the subdivision on the surface. And for now, I'm going to go to my Modify tab, which is the second tab over, and then change the parameters. So I'm just going to bring down these edge segments down to 2 by 2, so I have 4 polygons. So now if we want to work with a polygon, there are two ways we can do that. We can either convert this object by right-clicking and saying Convert to Edit Poly. You can see you also have the Mesh, Patch, and NURBS objects here. But for this case, we're going to actually just add an Edit Poly modifier. So if I'm in my Modify tab, which is the second tab over, and from the modifier list, if I select that and select Edit Poly from the list, the nice thing about doing it this way is that you don't lose the original object in your command panel here. So you can still go to the plane and then change parameters of that plane. And also work with edit poly features. So we're going to mostly just use edit poly modifiers. The also nice thing about edit poly modifiers is that you can add multiple edit poly modifiers. So you can begin to stack these, and on each edit poly you can perform a different command or a different operation to modify the geometry. So if I want to delete this, I can just right click and delete. So we're going to start with this first edit poly. For every edit poly, there are sub-objects of the edit poly. So basically what this modifier does is it allows you to modify the sub-objects of this geometry. So right now this object has 5 different sub-objects. The first one is the vertex. If I select vertex, you can see that there are the vertices that become accessible. So I can select these, I can move them, you can delete them, and there are all these different options, and we'll go over these later, but there are all these different options that are available depending on which sub-object you're in. So the next one is the edge. So if I select edges, I can start selecting edges. If you want to select multiple sub-objects, you can hold down Control, and that will allow you to select multiple. If you want to deselect one that you accidentally selected, you can hold down Alt and then deselect that one. You can drag over them, or you can just select directly on them. You can also use your move, rotate, and scale. So if I select rotate, for example, I can begin to rotate that sub-object geometry. You can also scale, so I can scale that geometry. Okay, and then again, you have all these different other options that you can do to modify that sub-object. The third one is the border. So the border is going to be the outline of the object, so the overall border of the object. But also, let's say you have, I'll just quickly chamfer this. Let's say you have an opening in your object. It's also going to apply to any opening. So if you have windows or doors or holes in your geometry, the border is the outside of the object, but it's also any opening in your object. The fourth one is the polygon. So the polygon are the different faces. So these are different polygons, and again you have different options of how to modify those faces. And then finally is the element, which is the overall object. If you have multiple polygons attached to each other, then each of those separated geometries, even though they're within one object, there'll be different elements within that object. So those are the 5 sub-objects of the edit poly. The other thing to know about edit polys, and we'll cover a lot of these later, but under the graphite modeling tools, these are all available to you because you're working in an edit poly. So you can see you can also toggle between the different sub-objects right here. So you can do it here, or you can do it here. And then when you're in one of these sub-objects, these are all the commands that you can use to begin to modify them. So one example of that would be if let's say I go to the polygon sub-object level, and I want to extrude that polygon, you can extrude and select extrude settings, and then a little pop-up will show up, and that'll allow you to change the extrusion height. You can also change the way it extrudes by group normals, local normals, or by each polygon. We'll cover that again later. And last thing is just to remember that you can add different edit polys. So if I want to add, let's say I just want to do that extrusion at that sub-object level, but I want to do a different command at a different subobject level, you can add a new edit poly on top of that, and then let's say change your edges. So maybe I'll chamfer these edges in this edit polygon. So that'll allow you then to separate these different commands into different modifiers within the stack, and basically that allows you to turn them on or off. So I can turn off, just the extrude, or I can turn off just the chamfer. And so as you begin to stack these, it's a good idea to always rename them. So I'm going to right click on this, rename it, and I can rename this chamfer vertices, for example. And that'll allow you to just keep track of all the different modifications and modifiers that you put onto the object.